Reacting to your CDL hot takes. I asked on Twitter for people to give me their hot takes about competitive Call of Duty. And as you can tell, today we're going to be going through some of these. And if you want to partake in things like this in the future, definitely check out my Twitter linked in the description. Let's start out with one of the hotter ones I saw from Austin here. He says OpTic will finish top 8 at Major 1. Now, obviously, this is a very hot take, right? OpTic is one of the better teams in the game. They, of course, have one of the bigger fan bases. So people have very high expectations for them, including myself. My expectations are very high for OpTic, especially right now, considering how good they are playing. And of course, anything is possible, right? At the beginning of the season, teams are still learning the game. They're still getting their chemistry together. So you might see a team win Major 1 that might not be as good the rest of the season. You also might see teams that are really good do bad at Major 1. You never really know what's going to happen. For me personally, I definitely don't agree with this take. I do think OpTic will do better than top 8 at Major 1. I feel like they're a team that's going to make Sunday, especially considering how good they are. They brought in 2 guys in Kenny and Pred who are both really good on LAN as well. So I think it's just one of those things where people say, you know, Shotzzy doesn't play as good on LAN, but Kenny is a guy who has won a lot, won on LAN. Pred is a guy who only has 1 major win, but has just been super consistent throughout the CDL since he's been in the league. So I personally think OpTic will do better than top 8 at Major 1, but you guys let me know what you think about that one in the comments. Next up here from Alex, we have the Carolina Royal Ravens have the potential to be a top 6 team. He says they're a very talented group that just needs some time to get adjusted. And this is one that I do agree with. I think they have the potential to be top 6. I think any team with Clay on it has high potential. You have a guy like Gwyn who's looking like a front runner or one of the front runners for Rookie of the Year through the first 2 weeks. Obviously, this is all hot takes for the first 2 weeks of the season. So obviously these takes can be very hot and they can be very hard to judge. But I do think they have the potential. I think all of these teams, for the most part, kind of have the potential to be upper echelon teams since we are so early in the season. But I do think Carolina is one of the teams that are probably looked at as the weakest and one of the front runners to make a roster change early on into the season. They haven't looked great. I'm pretty sure they've been like 3-0'd in all the series they didn't win. I think they're 1-3. Their 1 win came in that reverse sweep versus Legion. And I think they've been 3-0'd in every other series. So I do think they have the potential. I really believe in Gwyn. He was my prediction for Rookie of the Year. Of course, I believe in Clay. We've seen GodRx in the past do pretty decent in the CDL. And obviously, Real's also a rookie. I think they got to give it time, although it is tough, right? There's only 4 majors this year. They are playing more online matches, but you want to qualify for champs. If your team is really struggling after the first major, it might be worth considering making a change, especially if you have players really, really struggling. So I think they have the potential, but I don't really think they're going to live up to the potential. Unfortunately, I think they're probably going to be making a change after Major 1. Next up, we have 2 that are kind of similar here. So from Divinity and the #1 LAT Meat Rider on Twitter, they both kind of say that LAT can be really good. So Divinity said these will be 5th best team after Major 1. And #1 LAT Meat Rider says LAT has top 6 potential, just going to struggle with consistency. And both of these, for them being 5th after Major 1, I don't necessarily agree with that one. But I do agree they have top 6 potential. I do think this LA Thieves team, I am an LA Thieves fan, so maybe you could think I have a little bit of bias, of course. But I do think this LA Thieves team has potential. We know how good Cammy can be. Afro is a really high upside player, in my opinion. Joe Deceives has his moments where he looks really good. And then obviously we all know what Ghosty is capable of based on his rookie year last year on OpTic. I think they have potential. Like I just said for Ravens, I think a lot of these teams have the potential. I definitely don't think they're going to be 5th after Major 1. I kind of think we're going to struggle at Major 1. But I do hope this team rides it out a little bit longer just to see, because I do think all of these players have high upside and have all shown high upside in the past. Next up, we have here from Scythe. He says Toronto won't be as good as people thought they would be. And obviously, this is definitely a hot take, right? Toronto are looked at as a top 4 team, probably even top 3 coming into the year. Right now, I'd probably have them sitting at 4, though, after the first 2 weeks. And saying they're not going to be as good as they should be is definitely a hot take. I think it's one that I don't agree with. I think Toronto is going to be really good. If you saw what happened to them against Boston when they got swept, of course, nobody saw them getting swept by Boston Breach. Definitely was just not expected. But Envoy had a really, really bad series. I mean, I think he put up a 0.48 KD in those 3 maps, which is abysmal for any player in the CDL, but especially for a world champion in Envoy. I don't expect him to have another series like that. So I really think this Toronto team's going to be good. Overall, they haven't really showed a ton, I think, in their first couple series. You know, they're 2-1 or they're 3-1 right now, something like that. They look good when they win, but obviously, you know, there are definitely some things they're going to need to work on. But it's early in the year. I'm not going to overreact to it. I do think this team is going to be top 4 by the end of the season. Another really hot one here that I think is hard to judge from Carmelo. They said that Dashy would have more than 2 championship wins if he wasn't on OpTic. Now, this is really interesting, right? Because it's hard to judge what a player could have done in their career, right? It's impossible to say what someone could do or might do compared to what they've actually done, obviously. Dashy only has 2 wins in his career. Carmelo thinks that Dashy would have more if he was on a different team. And of course, I think there's some validity to that, right? Of course, you never really know what's going to happen. Maybe if Dashy had the opportunity to join different teams, he could have found himself on some other rosters that were really good. Maybe he found himself on FaZe at some point. Maybe he got in the subliners at some point. You know, these teams that have won in the past couple of years. I think it's an interesting, I think it's an interesting argument to be made that maybe Dashy would be better on another team outside of OpTic, but who really knows? It's really hard to say. I definitely think it's a hot take, right? To say that someone would win more when they're not on OpTic, because of course, most of the community is OpTic fans and they'd like to think you can win on their team. But who really knows? Let me know what you think about that one. And then let's end it off with this last one here from Rezer. He says OpTic needs to drop, Shotzzy and possibly, I'm guessing this is supposed to say Dashy, because I don't see why they would say, he would say Pred or Kenny because they're new on the team. So I'm guessing he's saying OpTic need to drop Shotzzy and Dashy if they really want to win. Now, obviously, this is a very, very hot take. They did win Major 1 in Vanguard with these players on the team, but since then, they haven't really won anything. They've had a couple second places, a few top 3s. You know, they made Sundays, of course. But it's definitely a super hot take, and I think it's interesting to think about, right? Because you think they did this merger with Envy. They kind of formed their own little super team with Scump and Shotzzy and Dashy and Illy. Of course, they won Major 1. Things looked great. Illy got injured. What could have been? It's hard to speculate what would have happened if Illy didn't get injured, of course. I don't think they need to drop Shotzzy or Dashy, especially right now to start the season. They're playing well. You got to at least ride it out and see what happens throughout the beginning part of this year. But I do think there needs to be, not a conversation, but like some sort of understanding that these players can be dropped, right? I think a lot of people think these guys are undroppable, not only because of how good they are, but because of the content they make and the personalities they are in the league. I think when it comes down to it, if the players on the team really say, we want to drop Shotzzy, we want to drop Dashy, we want to drop Pred, Kenny, anybody, whoever it is, if 3 players agree they should drop that 4th, I think it's going to happen. But personally, for me, I think this OpTic team is going to be really good this year. I don't think they're going to make a roster change. I really do think they're going to be a top 3 team throughout this entire season. And I do think they're going to get a major win at some point during this year, but who really knows? But that was reacting to your hot takes. Like I said, follow me on Twitter or at least check out the link below. And I'm going to do more of these throughout the season. I want to see more of your hot takes and do more reaction videos. I like interacting with the community. That's kind of one of my pillars I want to build this channel on, is forming this community of people where we really interact and we have a lot of fun talking about competitive Call of Duty. So definitely check out my Twitter, check out my TikTok. All that is linked down below. And consider subbing to this YouTube channel if you haven't already. And with all that being said, hopefully I'll see you all in the next video.